Hi, my name is Sudeep Sharma, and I'm a programmer for the festival. I want to welcome you to the post-screening conversation for My Name is Pauli Murray. Before we begin, I have a couple quick notes. The chat is open on the left side of the screen below with the video window where you saw this playing. Feel free to share comments and thoughts there, but if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box on the right-hand side. Don't be shy. As always, thank you for doing your part to foster conversations that are welcoming to all and abide by our community agreement. This includes treating moderators, artists, and your fellow audience members with respect. With that out of the way, please join me in welcoming the amazing team behind My Name is Pauli Murray. We have directors Betsy West and Julie Cohen, and we have the producer, Talea Bridges McMahon, and editor Sinque Northern. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Sudeep.
Good. Congratulations. While the questions are coming in, I just wanted to start it off by, I know in the intro, Betsy and Julie, you said about how you first heard about Pauli Murray, and I was wondering, going from hearing about Pauli Murray to wanting to make a film is a big step, and I'm wondering what made you do that?
I mean, you're right. It is a big leap. I think it was first the research that we started to do and the discovery of what an amazing person Pauli was. And then when we look further, several biographies, and we discovered that Pauli had put all these boxes into the Schlesinger Library, and that they included audio tapes. And that was the time when we thought, well, gee, maybe we can do this.
You know, this is a person who each chapter of their life is more fascinating than the last one. You almost can't, we almost couldn't believe how rich and multi-layered Pauli's story was. We were concerned, like, is there really going to be there was some talk like, oh, should this be a short? And I think, by the end we're like, this should be like an 8-part, we're believers in paring things down, but it was a real challenge for the whole team to get this down to 90 minutes.
Yeah. And we left out things, actually. So we hope people will continue to learn about Pauli.
Well, I'm sure that was actually one of my questions later, but I want to get to some audience questions first. I do want a lot of love coming from the chat, a lot of love for the film and for Pauli. And I want to start off with Katrina. She asked, thank you for sharing with us Pauli's story. What was the process like going through all the documents Pauli kept about themselves, and how extensive was it?
Talea, that's your question.
So, yes. So I am the one who spent a lot of time at the archives, and it was really such a gift for us. As they were saying, it would have been I'm sure a person could make a movie about Pauli Murray, but it would not have been as personal as we were able to make it. And I will say that is one of the things that struck me most about going through Pauli's archive. If you read Pauli's autobiography, it's really compelling, but it really focuses on Pauli's professional life. And what the archives allowed us to do was to have access to letters, diary entries, so many personal notes from Pauli that it really allowed us to add another dimension to the film. And that was really exciting.
Well, for Sinque, I'm just kind of curious too, because there's so many different types of elements. There's like archival materials, there's interviews, there's written materials. Did you have a process in terms of how to visually show all these in terms of editing, or was there a overall vision you had when you started the film?
Yeah, just to really show Pauli's point of view as much as possible, and to make it as experiential. So really, whatever it was that Pauli was saying, whatever story was being told, whatever narration, just to try and make the archival experiential, and not just, well, this is what Pauli's talking about, so let's show that, but more like, what would Pauli have seen in that situation? So as much as possible, I tried to take a POV approach so that you could see what Pauli experienced through Pauli's eyes as best possible.
And actually, I just want to add to that to say that it really was a dance figuring out. I think in the beginning, we were sort of hesitant. We were like, we're making a film, we're not making a book. And so how many words can we actually put on the screen? And we would craft a scene and then say, well, how much of this can we strip away? What is really the essence of what we need here? And so figuring out the balance between Pauli's audio and Pauli's written text was a key part of the process.
And we usually found that the answer to every dilemma was just to be listening to Pauli's words, just to be sort of guiding. We're fortunate that our subject is not only an extraordinary, historical figure, but also was an amazing writer and speaker. So there's, the poems are their own narratives, but even a harsh letter to FDR or a personal letter to a lover, like just brought in who this human being was.
Linda's got a question that I must admit is also kind of true for me, because I did not know much about Pauli Murray before seeing this film. I much at all. And Linda asks, how in the world did we not know more of Pauli Murray earlier?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question, and it's a complicated answer, I think. I mean, you could say racism, you could say sexism. I think also, Pauli's non-binary identity might have encouraged her to be a little more reticent from coming out in the front as a leader. And it may also have been something that people consciously or unconsciously pushed away on. So it's, it's really difficult to know. We are very happy, as you saw, that at the end of the film, that Pauli is beginning to have a day. More people are getting to know about Pauli Murray, and we're thrilled to be part of that.
And it also seems to be sort of a consequence of being so ahead of the times, that if you are not part of the movement, if you're at the forefront and you're maybe the lone voice pushing for something, or you're just one of a handful of people pushing for something, that you don't really end up being the person recognized so much, that the people who are really the leaders of a movement tend to be the people that we ultimately learn about.
And I think there was a restlessness to Pauli that, once having made a contribution in one area, was like, okay, I'm on to the next. So.
And that's what's amazing about Pauli Murray. I have another question from Bendrina, who, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. At what point in the process of making the film do you realize you needed to interview Professor Brittany Cooper? Great to see her help narrate Pauli's story.
Yeah, it was great.
So we had a consulting producer on the film, Patricia Bell Scott, who wrote the book, The Firebrand and the First Lady, and is also interviewed in the film. And we went to hear a talk that Patricia Bell Scott was doing at the Schomburg Center in New York City. And joining her in that talk was Professor Cooper. Talaya had actually already mentioned that Brittany Cooper, I don't know to what extent you knew about her.
I had actually interviewed Brittany Cooper for another project, and so I was very familiar with her work. And so when I saw that Brittany also was passionate about Pauli, I was like, she has to be in our project.
When we heard her speaking at this event, we were like, okay. And actually, the two of them together were such a good contrast. So.
And it's also how we found Margaretta McBean. I don't know if you want to talk about
that. The daughter of Margaretta McBean stood up in the sort of Q&A and said, my mother told me about these stories and I wasn't quite sure whether or not to believe them. I mean, she used to exaggerate things and I didn't know if they were true. And then all of a sudden I saw this book and I was leafing through the book and I saw my mother's name in the index and was like, oh my God, she was telling the truth. And they did get arrested and get sent to jail and meet Thurgood Marshall. So that was another moment where Julie and I were sitting on different parts of the audience and we're like looking at each other like, go talk to her right away.
I think this question for everyone is from Jesse. As stewards of telling Pauli's story, what components of Pauli's life and story resonated for you most personally?
I guess I could start that.
Yeah, please.
For me, I think it was Pauli's ability to push through even when the world was not affirming Pauli's work. But I think it's actually really hard to be the lone voice and to not even always have victories. You know, there were so many times where Pauli tried something or pushed for change and it didn't work out. And so to just stay, the fact that Pauli was able to just stay inspired really resonated with me.
Yeah, I would say Pauli's courage to no matter, you know, Pauli entered so many different fields and so many spaces where if something seemed to not be right, Pauli didn't change. Pauli tried to change it. So there was just this strong commitment to what is right. And it didn't matter if it was in civil rights or women's rights, there's like a higher ideal that Pauli kind of stood for, where no matter what space Pauli went in, it was like, it's not me, this is gonna have to change. And I think that takes a lot of courage. I've always liked that about Pauli. And Pauli's smile. I mean, given everything that Pauli had been through, this smile that just kind of, I always just wanted to show every shot of a smile with Pauli in the film, because it's a smile of somebody who's lived almost a different life than Pauli led. So I think it speaks to a certain strength and courage.
Absolutely.
What resonated to me was Pauli's writing. You know, Pauli's grandniece says in the film that all Pauli's life, it was, you will see me, you will hear me. And when you read Pauli's words and listen to the audio tapes, it just feels like this is a person that was writing to be read and speaking to be heard. So to be in the sort of luxurious position that we were in, to be taking in all these words and then figuring out how to bring them out into the world, felt like touching, I would say, almost. Just.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I agree with everything that you've said, but also that, you know, Pauli's journey foreshadowed many of the issues that we're dealing with today. And, you know, we started the film before the pandemic, and then we all went into quarantine. And then in the summer, Black Lives Matter was happening. And we just couldn't help but think all the time of Pauli Murray. I mean, here is someone who in 1943, the response to these race riots, by the way, you know, something we knew nothing about, the riots in Detroit where policemen and white mobs were murdering African Americans, something we'd never heard about. Pauli writing this poem basically saying Black Lives Matter in 1943. I mean, it's just so many ways that Pauli's journey resonates with what we're thinking about today.
That's really nice from everybody. There's another interesting question. I think it was about the archive, which I think you would mention how critical it was. It's from Sam. So much of Pauli's story seems to be able to be told because Pauli kept so many papers and tapes and bequeathing them to the library. Was there any indication of Pauli's motivation for preserving Pauli's paper so pristinely and fully from so early in Pauli's life? Is there, do you think Pauli had a reason beyond keeping a record of Pauli's life?
Well, I think the good news is that Pauli's reason was really what's come to be, like the hope that people would write books and, you know, tell stories and maybe make films. I mean, you know, one of the two biographers that we talked to, Patricia Bell-Scott and Rosalind Rosenberg, we both talked to in the film, and Patricia mentioned that Pauli, who had corresponded with Patricia in life, mentioned wanting there to be a film of Pauli's story. Like, I mean, it's a good lesson to, if you're doing like lots of amazing things, like keep some boxes and save everything. But like, the bar is high, but like, you know, it's really a fortunate thing, because I don't think it certainly wouldn't have been possible, or it would have been very challenging to make a documentary. And I don't think it would have been that easy for the biographers to do their work without this incredible archive, which Pauli had not organized so well, but apparently Rini had.
I mean, it's also amazing how far back the archive goes. You know, from those pictures just really blew us away from the 1930s, that Pauli had saved that 30s and 40s. And you have to remember the kind of, you know, peripatetic, difficult life that Pauli was leading. I mean, moving from place to place to place, and yet carrying all of this material. around. So you do have this sense that Pauli had a sense of history and perhaps a feeling of being discovered, that Pauli deserved a place in history, and perhaps it would come later on.
There's a question from Allison that is asking you, what is something that you did leave out that you felt you wish made the cut for what the film is?
It's funny. People always ask that about documentaries. Sometimes we don't love the question. With this one, we're sort of eager, right? Because there are so many chapters that we didn't even start to get into. I mean, we could start listing some things. Pauli was the first Black Deputy Attorney General of the state of California. Pauli wrote a book for the United Methodist Church in which was cataloged like every segregation law through the whole South that was used by the Thurgood Marshall team also in their work of laws to strike down. Pauli advocated against the death penalty for a defendant named Odell Waller. It's an incredible story, a good story that could be a whole book in itself. Look it up. Other people?
Pauli was a saint. Pauli was a saint.
The Episcopal Church, Pauli is officially a saint.
And Pauli was instrumental in making sure that sex, not just race, was included in the Civil Rights Act when it passed.
Civil Rights Act, yeah. And Pauli's book, Proud Shoes, which is about the history of Pauli's family, mostly in the 19th century, was really a precursor to Roots. And Pauli felt that also.
Right.
And it's an extraordinary book. I mean, we hope people will read Pauli's autobiography and Pauli's other amazing poetry, Dark Testament, and books and biographies. Fascinating.
To me, like,
go
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, and then on the personal side, and we allude to it a little, but Pauli's relationship with Aunt Pauline was really, really beautiful. And just on Pauline's level of progressive thinking and acceptance of Pauli, like it really tracks through Pauli's life, which I think had a lot to do with how confident Pauli was in that they were okay. It wasn't the world. There was something wrong with the world, not Pauli. I think a lot of that came from Pauli's family, and specifically Aunt Pauline, who really accepted Pauli across, their lives.
Well, you do talk about in the film, like one of the most interesting things to me is her religious background, and in that part where RBG's like, yeah, I know her, but I didn't know that. I never really understood it. Like, and I'm just kind of curious, you could talk a little bit more about that, because she's such a public person, but there's even this element that even her friends are like, I don't really get this. Like, I'm wondering, like, how did that express in her life, and how did you want to, how did you feel did you struggle with approaching it in the film?
I think it was Pauli's activist friends that couldn't relate to that, because that isn't always a foundation of some of the core activists. Although particularly in the women's rights movement, they were like, whoa, religion, like what's that about? But I think people who were close with Pauli in life and family like understood that a deep spirituality had been part of life from childhood on, and of course that was a big part of the bond with Renee Barlow. Was that like almost secret discovery, like, oh, we're both Episcopalians and we both really care about it.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to drop little hints about it so that Pauli turning to the priesthood is not a total surprise. I mean, we did include the connection with Renee based on their common religion, and Pauli's poem on the death of Mac Parker, which she refers to as, a prayer. So tried to give little hints about it so people wouldn't be completely shocked, but her friends, many of her friends were, that she would go that far to actually enter the seminary. The other thing that people don't know is that when Pauli entered the seminary, the Episcopal Church did not allow women to be ordained. So Pauli went, quit this good job that Pauli had fought for, and went to seminary, not knowing whether or not the priesthood would be open to women.
Natalie has a question that I think is interesting. Pauli is in many ways a patron saint to many of us in Triangle, North Carolina. What are your plans for sharing this film and having conversations with the local community there?
Well, we have a very strong relationship with the Pauli Murray House. You should recognize Barbara Lau, who I hope is watching, who is the director of the Pauli Murray Center there. And so we are coordinating to try to figure out opportunities for local screenings and to try to do as much outreach in the community as possible.
That's great. Morgan has a question. If Pauli were alive today, what question would you like to ask Pauli?
Wow.
You know, I actually think that would bring us to the thing in our society that has changed so hugely since Pauli's lifetime, which is the opening up of life for gender nonconforming people. And I think the questions that we would ask Pauli would be somewhat, I mean, as Dolores Chandler brought out, like, you know, I can't answer what pronouns Pauli would use because Pauli's not here to ask, and like that would sort of, that would be one question we'd ask. But I think in an even broader way, just if Pauli lived in society where there was more freedom to express one's gender as one pleases, like what, you know, how would that have changed life? How might it have changed Pauli's activism?
I have a question too, just about making the film. You're very collaborative, all of you, but it's also a co-directed project, and it's just for Julie and Betsy. Like, how do you work together on a film like this in a way that you both are directing it?
Well, we have worked together before, and we do a little bit of divide and conquer, and we also had Talea as part of, really became a tripod divide and conquer in a way, so that we all shared in planning for interviews, and we would all be, one person would be doing the interview, but we would be sharing it and perhaps coming in and asking some follow-up questions. And then when it came to starting to structure the film, as Sinquay was doing sequences and, you know, bringing his visual creativity to it, we were taking chapters that, you know, we suspected were going to be in the film, and each one of us kind of blocking out a chapter, and then, you know, Sinquay would put something together and it would evolve with him. Then we'd all look at it and make our comments. I mean, sort of the process.
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty research heavy process.
Yeah.
Doc, as films go, there was a big learning curve about, you know, all of Pauli's life and the many decades of history that the film is covering. So we did kind of break it up by sections, or even, you know, there was so much of Pauli's audio tape, and we would break that up too and create little pods before. I think we might have used the word pod before everyone was into their COVID pods. Create a little pod or mod on each on various subjects, and then start like, I feel like we started like in miniature before we could even any of us think like, what's this whole huge thing going to be? Because it was a little bit overwhelming as a project.
Sarah has an interesting question. How do we identify the Pauli Murrays of today, trailblazers who are not getting the respect or attention their work deserves?
I don't know. How do we identify them? Well, as Julie said, times have changed for trans people. It's not perfect, and I can't speak for trans people, but I think that there is more of an openness, and I hope, you know, more acceptance in this world now. And, you know, one of the responses that we've had to the film is thank you for telling the story of a role model.
I would say that, you know, what's remarkable about Pauli, I think that we actually do see these people now. And what's remarkable about Pauli's existence is that people saw Pauli at the time. They just thought Pauli was absurd. And so we do hear ideas in this day and age, and we tend to call those people too radical. Even if we agree with what they're saying, we say those things aren't possible to achieve. And so I think maybe what we could do is, the issue is not necessarily identifying those people, but actually supporting those people when they do articulate a better vision for our society.
Well, I also am like, you know, this is a film that's about the past, but I think it's related to this question. It's like I think it says something about our present, but I'm kind of curious for all of you, like, what do you hope it's going to do for the future? Like, what do you think knowing about Pauli will help people understand about where we're going as a society?
I think we want people not only to engage with Pauli's specific ideas, which are amazing and provide tons of fodder, but just like, it just feels like looking at this life of Pauli's is part of a larger question of like, how do we look at history, and what we learned in school, was that really the full picture, or does there need to be more? And I think the thing that's nice about it is that it's kind of positive, because it's like there's this avenue for growth and learning. There's been so much talk over the past year about the statues that we knocked down, but like Pauli's an example of someone who metaphorically and literally we should be putting statues up.
I completely agree. We are running out of time, and I wish we could keep going. But I want to thank you so much for sharing this film with us, especially this year and this time. I wish we could gather together, but it was so wonderful to have you all here and to talk about the film, and to also have the audience here to watch it with us. And so I want to thank you all for taking part of it, and everyone watching for being here. And I want to remind you that there is a party in Film Party afterwards in the New Frontier space. So I hope you will join us to dance with our avatars and talk and to communicate. If
We'll
you
try.
are,
We'll
yeah.
we'll try to find the party.
Yes. And if you're watching here, you are able to go. So please go to the New Frontier space and do it. And I, really thank everybody for taking part, especially the team behind this amazing film. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.